Hello, welcome to another episode of Henry's Library. I'm your host, Jacqueline Douge. Let's get started with today's adventure. How do flowers and vegetables grow? It was a sunny Saturday morning. Henry's dad had just returned home from the store. Henry and his friends watched as Henry's dad walked back and forth from the car to the garage with his wheelbarrow filled with bags. "Is that dirt he's carrying?" Curry asked. "It looks like it," Dogbear said. "I know dirt when I see it." Dogbear was an expert on dirt, as he loved to dig around in the backyard. "In the spring, Dad likes to plant flowers, but I've never seen him use that much dirt," Henry said. "I know," Dogbear said. "He must be planting a tree." Curry smiles excitedly. "I'll have a new tree to store acorns!" Birdie flies down and lands next to Dogbear. "I don't know if Henry's dad is going to plant a tree." "How do you know?" Curry asked. "Birdie's right. I just saw Dad with a bunch of seed packets," Henry said. "There were pictures of vegetables, no trees." Curry looked sad. "Cheer up, my friend," Birdie said. "I'm happy to share my tree." That idea made Curry smile. Henry and his friends continued to watch his dad until it was lunchtime. Henry went inside and his friends played outside. "Dad, can you plant and grow vegetables in the same yard you plant flowers?" Henry asked. "That's a very good question," Dad said. "Do you know how we can answer that question?" "We can investigate. Can we go to the library after lunch?" "Yes, we can," Dad said. Henry and his dad took a walk to the library. His friends were having so much fun playing that they decided to stay home. But before he left, Henry told his friends about his new investigation. They were excited for Henry to return and share what he learned. At the library, Henry and his dad saw Mr. Slink sitting at the front desk greeting people and answering questions. He looked up and saw Henry and his dad. "Hey," he said, "you arrived just in time before the library closes. We're closing early to celebrate Mrs. Simon's birthday." "Thanks for letting us know," Henry's dad said. He and Henry then walked to the children's area of the library where Mrs. Simon worked. "Hello," Mrs. Simon said, smiling at Henry and his dad. "I see that look on your face. What's today's question?" "I want to know how we can grow vegetables in our yard." "I have just the book for you," Mrs. Simon said. "I'll be right back." While they waited, Henry and his dad started talking. "Mrs. Simon always helps me find books. I want to do something nice for her birthday," Henry said. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," Henry's dad said. "Do you have any ideas?" "Not yet, but I'll think of something." Mrs. Simon returned holding a new book for Henry. "This book I think will help answer your question. It's The Ugly Vegetables by Grace Lynn." "I remember her. She's the same author of the book about kites," Henry said. "I love that book." "I remember," Mrs. Simon said. "That book was Kite Flying by Grace Lynn. I think you'll enjoy this book as well." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Simon," Henry and his dad said. On the walk home, Henry remembered something. "We forgot to wish Mrs. Simon a happy birthday." "Well, it's not too late," Dad said. "We can wish her a happy birthday later." "Yeah," Henry said. "I'll come with a great birthday surprise for her." Later that afternoon, Henry showed his friends the new book that Mrs. Simon had given him to read. He took out his special feather bookmark from the silver tin where he kept it. He touched the feather to the book, then the wind started to blow. Everyone held on to each other. They took a hand, a wing, or a paw. They all entered the book and began their adventure to learn about a family that grows special vegetables. Henry was surprised to see that people could grow both flowers and vegetables in their garden. He and his friends also learned about different Chinese vegetables. They especially loved the smell of the special soup that was being made from the vegetables. The soup was called ugly vegetable soup. "I think it's time to go," Henry said. "But we didn't try the soup," Curry said. "You're always hungry," Birdie said. "I'll ask my dad to grow the same vegetables in his garden. Then we can make the soup and all try it," Henry said, waving the feather. "Hold on." As soon as Henry returned, he ran to the backyard with the book and told his dad all about the adventure he had. He showed the pictures of the Chinese vegetables that grew in the book and the recipe for the wonderful smelling soup. Henry's dad took a picture of the recipe and vegetables from the book so that he knew which seeds to buy. Henry then had an idea. "Dad, I know what gift we can give to Mrs. Simon for her birthday." "What?" Dad asked. "We can give her flowers," Henry said. "That's a wonderful idea," Dad said. Henry and his friends helped his dad begin to build the new vegetable garden. When they finished, Curry and Birdie returned to their tree houses, and Henry, Dad, and Dogbear went into the house to clean up and get ready to go to Mrs. Simon's home. "Isn't Mom coming with us?" Henry asked. "Mom plans to join us after she finishes seeing her last patient," Dad said. They stopped by the florist on the way to Mrs. Simon's house. Henry was excited to pick out the perfect flowers. He chose a combination of pink and yellow flowers because those were Mrs. Simon's favorite colors. The moment had arrived. Henry and his dad and Dog Bear walked up to Mrs. Simon's house. There were 3 other cars. One was Mrs. Simon, the other was his mom's, but the third one looked familiar. It looked like his grandma's, but it couldn't be. She was still in Florida. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Simon," Henry said as she opened the front door. "These are for you." "They are beautiful," Mrs. Simon said, then gave Henry a hug. "I can't believe all the wonderful surprises that I received today. A party, these flowers, and a visit from my best friend." Henry knew who Mrs. Simon's best friend was, but he had to investigate to make sure it was who he thought it was. He walked through the house and didn't see her until he was in the kitchen. He saw his mom standing next to his grandma making dinner. "Grandma!" He ran over to her and gave her the biggest hug that he'd ever given her. "I wanted to surprise you, but instead you surprised me," Grandma said. "There were a lot of surprises today," Henry said. "I have one more surprise," Grandma said. "What is it?" Henry asked. "I'll be coming back home in the next month," Grandma said. Henry gave his grandma another big hug, then asked her a question. "Are you staying at our house tonight?" "Yes, I am," Grandma said. "I can't wait to hear about your adventures. Mrs. Simon told me about the new book you bought from the library." Henry thought about the characters in his book and what happened this evening. He was surrounded by his family, Mrs. Simon, and Dog Bear. This was the best dinner and the biggest and most wonderful surprise he had ever had. The end. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Henry's Library. We hope you and your family enjoyed this story and learned something new, and maybe an idea or two that you want to investigate and learn about by reading books. Join us next week for another adventure with Henry, Curry, Dog Bear, and Birdie. Parents, please rate, review, subscribe, and share the podcast. And we'd love to hear what your kids are learning and like about the show. You can send us a message via email to hi@whatisblack.co. You can also go to our website, whatisblack.co/Henry's Library Podcast, to see the books mentioned in this episode and links to fun activities. We encourage you to read the books from the episode together as a family. Books mentioned in this episode can be found at your local library or bookstore. We love all bookstores and hope that you consider checking out your local independent bookstores to support them.